On a ketogenic diet, it's very important that there is close guidance given to meal prescriptions and planning of meals. First of all, the meal prescription is generally designed around the needs of the individual, so it will be providing sufficient protein, carbohydrate and fat and calories to meet the needs of the individual. And it's very important that that prescription is followed very closely so that the outcome can be tracked very closely, and if the outcome is not appropriate or if things aren't working the way they should, then that prescription can be adjusted. And during a ketogenic diet treatment, the prescription can be changed many, many times. So it's very important that it is maintained at the correct prescription so that that can be adjusted carefully. In ketogenic therapy, there's always an element of measuring. You can't get away from measuring. Now, in some regimes, there's a lot of measuring to do. And the importance of that is that when you're measuring the foods, it means that you're giving the right proportion of protein, carbohydrate and fat at every meal. And so measuring to make sure that that's accurate is really, really crucial. Now, in other regimes, you may only be measuring certain items. So in the modified regime or the low glycemic index treatment, you perhaps are only measuring the carbohydrate containing foods, but it still does involve an element of measuring. And then further on from that, you actually need to also weigh yourself and measure yourself, or weigh your child and measure your child on a regular basis. So weighing and measuring is crucial. Well, it's really important to start to understand labelling and nutritional values on foods, because you need to start looking at food in a different way. You need to look at not just what it looks like on the outside, but you need to know what it's got on in the inside. And so it's very important to gradually get a little bit of confidence in being able to look at a nutrition label and understand what's in there. So in some regimes, say the classical or the MCT regimes, you are going to be needing to look at protein, carbohydrate and fat. When we're talking about the modified regimes, such as the modified ketogenic diet or the low glycemic index treatment, then you may actually only be looking at the carbohydrate value and counting that. But it is really important to feel confident about being able to pick up a food, look at the label and actually just get a basic understanding of what's in there. So when we're looking at a nutrition label, it's important to look at the information that's headed per 100 grams, because that gives a standard value for each food item, and it's always the item that will be on the label. It will always say per 100 grams. And just look at mainly the carbohydrate value and, if necessary, the protein and the fat value. You don't really need to look at the other elements. It's important to home in on those elements first. And you will be given lots of help in understanding labels by your keto team. And then you can also refer to the Matthews Friends website for further guidance. In ketogenic therapy, you're often given exchange sheets, and these may relate to protein exchanges or carbohydrate exchanges or fat exchanges, depending on the regime that you're following and the areas that are going to be counted. Now, these sheets can be very, very helpful and can help you to actually make up a meal. And so they're effectively a little bit like costing sheets. So they can give you a list of foods. If we're to say talking about carbohydrate, for example, you may have a list of foods containing carbohydrate, and the items on that list all contain 1 gram of carbohydrate. So if you've got a prescription, say, for 5 grams of carbohydrate in your meal, then you know that you can have 5 lots of 1 gram of carbohydrate. And so it doesn't matter how you take that carbohydrate, it's just that you need to include 5 grams. So it allows a bit of flexibility on the types of foods that you're including, but helps you just to keep to the amount that you need to include. So this is where exchange sheets can be very, very helpful. And they're often the way that you're helped in the early stages to calculate the amounts of protein, fat and carbohydrate that you need for your meal. You have to be careful with everything that you include in your meals or you add to meals. However, there are a few items that can be used, such as obviously seasoning can be added to the meals, so salt and pepper. Small pinches of dried herbs and spices are generally considered perfectly okay to add. There are ranges of sugar-free drinks that may be included, but really you have to be guided by your individual keto team and the individual prescription requirements. So it's very, very important that you check with the team as to what little extras that may be added and may not have a negative impact. EKM stands for Electronic Ketogenic Manager, and it is a computer program that can assist in calculating ketogenic meals. Whereas generally, particularly if you're trying to count both protein, carbohydrate and fat, you can get in quite a pickle with all your calculations. It can be quite difficult. But this program actually contains tables of food values of protein, carbohydrate and fat. And so what you can do is just basically type in the amount of food item that you're putting in your meal, and then it will give you the value, and then you can add further items onto your recipe, and it can actually work out your protein, carbohydrate and fat totals for the meal. So really it's what we tend to use as a next step on from using exchanges, and it can certainly help when you're calculating more complicated meals with lots of ingredients. And it can help you to get the prescription amount for the meal bang on. It can really, really help with that. So it's a very useful addition if you want to use it. In terms of planning, then it's very important to plan meals. Because unlike in a normal day-to-day life where we can just pick up a food or pop out and grab an item of food, that's not quite the same when you're on a ketogenic diet. You do need to think ahead. You need to have things planned ahead. You need to have things ready so that a meal is available when it's needed. So planning ahead, working out menus, doing shopping lists, all that sort of thing is really, really important, and it makes for a much, much, much happier, much calmer stage of introducing the ketogenic diet. When you're actually changing your eating habits, changing your diet and changing the diet of your child, it's really useful to keep a record of what's going on. And that might be quite hard to do with lots and lots of things going on at the same time, but that can be really, really useful. It can help you to track which meals seem to go down really well, which don't work, where you might want to make changes next time you're actually preparing something. And it can also be a really, really helpful record alongside all your monitoring, all your blood monitoring and also seizure monitoring, just to give you a feel of really that you're going maybe in the right direction, and that can be really reassuring to look back on as you progress through the ketogenic journey.
Well, it can be quite daunting. It is quite time-consuming initially, but after a few weeks, you're into your stride and you've got the backup behind you, and it becomes a lot easier. And by now, it's second nature.
There does seem to be an awful lot to do, but take it a step at a time and you'll manage it. So it's important to learn a bit more about food, look at labels, understand them, ask lots of questions of your team, work really closely with your medical team. Think about your kitchen, think about your scales, getting things prepared, easy ways of storing food, and also making notes and planning ahead so that you're not caught short and you've always got something to hand if you need it. It really does seem very daunting at the start, but don't worry. There is always help at hand. You can always ask. There are other people who can support you along the way. And just take it steady, step at a time, and you will make it.